The morning Diane Carter walked into Bellamy's fine dining for what would become the most important shift of her life, she was running 3 minutes late and her left shoe had a crack in the sole that let the cold February air bite her heel with every step. She had been on her feet for 11 hours the day before, then taken the last bus home, then stayed up until 1 in the morning helping her daughter Amani practice for a spelling bee that neither of them could afford to lose focus on. She had dark circles under her eyes, her uniform was pressed with military precision, and she was smiling. That was Diane. No matter what the morning handed her, she smiled. She tied her apron strings at the service station, nodded at her coworkers Marcus and Jess, and picked up her section assignments without complaint. Table 4 through table 9. Corner of the room near the tall windows that looked out over the frozen fountain in Bellamy's courtyard. The nicest section in the restaurant, the one the managers gave to the servers they trusted most. Diane had held that section for 6 years. If you enjoy stories about dignity, courage, and the moment justice decides to show up, stay with me until the very end, because what happens in this restaurant today is something none of the 43 people inside it will forget for the rest of their lives. The lunch rush arrived the way it always did at Bellamy's, gradually, then all at once. Business suits, anniversary couples, ladies who lunched in cashmere and pearls. Diane moved through her section with the quiet efficiency that looked effortless from the outside but was built from years of reading people, anticipating needs, and treating every table like the only table in the room. She refilled water glasses before they were half empty. She remembered that the gentleman at table 6 had a nut allergy from the last time he'd visited, 4 months ago. She brought the couple at table 8 a complimentary slice of the chocolate torte because she had overheard them mention an anniversary and the woman had teared up looking at the menu. That was the kind of server Diane was. That was the kind of human being she was. At 12:47, a party of 3 was seated at table 5. 2 men and a woman, all of them in clothing that communicated money without trying to, the kind of money that doesn't need a logo. The man in the center, the one who sat down first and let the other 2 wait for his cue before they sat, was named Richard Holt. 53 years old, founder and chief executive of Holt Capital Group, a private equity firm whose name appeared in the financial press at least twice a week. His face had been on the cover of 3 business magazines. He had been profiled in a documentary about American wealth that had over 20 million views on the internet. In the city, his name carried the particular weight that belongs to men who have never once in their adult lives been told no. Diane approached table 5 with her notepad, her smile, and her absolute best professional composure. Good afternoon, welcome to Bellamy's. My name is Diane, and I'll be taking care of you today. Can I start you off with some still or sparkling water? Richard Holt looked up from his phone for exactly 1 second. He looked at Diane the way some people look at furniture, not with hostility, but with the particular blankness of someone who does not consider what they are seeing to be worth the energy of a full thought. Then he looked back at his phone. Get me someone else, he said. Diane kept her smile in place. I'm sorry, I said get me someone else. He still did not look up. I don't want you serving my table. The 2 people with him, a younger man who appeared to be an associate and a woman who seemed to be in a similar professional role, both went very still. The kind of stillness that happens when people know something wrong is occurring and are deciding in real time whether they are brave enough to say so. Diane kept her voice level, warm, and professional. Is there something I can help you with, sir, or is there a preference I can accommodate? Now he looked up. He looked at her fully, with the kind of deliberate unhurried contempt that is meant to communicate a hierarchy. You look like you'd struggle with the menu. I need someone who can actually keep up with a business conversation. Ask your manager to send someone with a bit more going on upstairs. You understand what I'm saying, or do I need to slow down? The restaurant did not go quiet all at once. It went quiet table by table, the way silence spreads across water when you drop something into it. The couple at table 8 stopped mid-sentence. The group of 4 at table 6 put down their forks. Marcus, who was passing through the room with a tray of sparkling water, stopped walking. Within the span of about 4 seconds, 42 people in that restaurant were watching table 5. And Diane stood there. For a moment, just a moment, something moved across her face that was not quite pain and not quite anger but was somewhere in that territory where the 2 meet when they have been accumulating for a long time. She was a 41-year-old black woman who had a bachelor's degree in business administration from a state university she had attended on academic scholarship. She had graduated with honors while raising Amani as a single mother after her husband passed away from a sudden cardiac event when Amani was 2 years old. She had taken the job at Bellamy's because the hours allowed her to be home in the afternoons when Imani came back from school, and because the tips at a restaurant of this caliber were steady enough to keep them in their apartment and Imani in her after-school programs. She had been offered a management position twice and declined both times because the schedule would have required evening hours and she was not willing to trade Imani's dinners for a title. Richard Holt did not know any of that. He had looked at Diane for 4 seconds and decided who she was. She took one quiet breath. "I'll let my manager know you'd like to speak with someone," she said, with a composure that later, when people tried to describe it to others who hadn't been there, they would struggle to find the right word for. Dignity was the one most of them landed on. Pure, unshakable dignity. She turned and walked to the host stand where her manager, Paul Reeves, was reviewing a reservation list. She told him calmly and precisely what had occurred. Paul was a decent man who had worked in hospitality for 20 years and did not like what he was hearing, but he was also a man who understood that Richard Holt's company held a standing reservation for a private dining event at Bellamy's every quarter that brought in significant revenue, and for a moment, just a moment, she could see him calculating. Before he could finish calculating, something happened. A woman at table 7 stood up. Her name was Gloria Osei, a 60-year-old retired surgeon who was having lunch with her daughter. She had heard everything. She looked at Paul Reeves and she said, in a voice that carried with the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades in operating theaters, "I want it noted that if the management of this restaurant accommodates that man's request, my family will not be returning, and I will be explaining why in detail on every platform available to me." Then the man at table 6, the one with the nut allergy that Diane had remembered after 4 months, pushed back his chair slightly and said, "Same." The couple at table 8 exchanged a look, and the woman said, "We've been coming here for 9 years. Handle this correctly." Paul Reeves stood very still for approximately 3 seconds. Then he straightened his jacket, told Diane he would handle it, and walked to table 5. Diane stood at the service station. Marcus appeared at her elbow, set down his tray, and stood next to her without saying a word. Jess appeared on her other side. Neither of them said anything. They just stood there. In the language of people who work long shifts together and know each other's weight, this meant everything. Paul Reeves stood at table 5 and he addressed Richard Holt with the kind of measured courtesy that is not warmth but is its professional cousin. "Mr. Holt, I understand you've had a concern. I want to let you know that Diane is our most senior server and one of the finest professionals on our team. I'm not able to reassign your table on the basis of a personal preference of this nature. Diane will be happy to continue serving you, and I'm confident you'll find the service excellent. If that arrangement doesn't work for you, I'd be glad to help you find another dining option for today." Richard Holt looked at Paul with the expression of a man who was not accustomed to sentences like that being directed at him. A muscle moved in his jaw. His associate looked at the tablecloth. The woman with him had been quiet through all of this, and now she picked up her handbag from the back of her chair and set it in her lap, which was the posture of a person who has decided they are leaving. "You're going to lose a significant client over a waitress," Holt said, and the word was dropped like a coin on a marble floor, meant to ring. "I'm going to maintain a standard I'm proud of," Paul said. "I hope you'll reconsider, but the decision is yours." Holt stood. His associate stood a half beat later. The woman with him was already standing. They walked out. The door to Bellamy's closed behind them with a sound that was, appropriately, very ordinary. And then the restaurant, all 42 remaining people in it, began to applaud. It started at table 7, with Gloria Osei, and it spread the way the silence had spread, table by table, until the room was full of it. Not the performative applause of a moment being manufactured, but the genuine, slightly awkward, deeply human applause of people who had witnessed something that mattered and wanted to say so with their hands because they couldn't find the words quickly enough. Diane stood at the service station and for the second time in 20 minutes something moved across her face. But this time it was different. This time it was the particular expression that belongs to people who have been carrying something heavy for a long time and have just been reminded, in an unexpected moment, that they are not carrying it alone. She pressed her lips together. She breathed once through her nose. Then she straightened her apron, picked up her notepad, and walked back into her section. She went to table 7 first. Gloria Osei looked up at her, and what passed between them in that look was the kind of communication that doesn't require language because it is older than language. Diane thanked her. Gloria told her she had nothing to thank anyone for, that was the only right thing, and right things don't require thanks, they require doing. Her daughter reached across the table and briefly touched Diane's hand. Diane finished her shift. She served every table in her section with the same attentiveness she had brought through the door that morning. She remembered the nut allergy and the anniversary and the preference for still water. She recommended the pan-seared halibut to a couple who couldn't decide between two dishes and described it in terms that made the woman close her menu and say yes before Diane had finished the sentence. At the end of the shift, her tip envelope was the heaviest it had been in 6 years. Table 7, Gloria Ose, had left her $300 and a note that said, simply, for the spelling bee. Diane had not mentioned Amani to anyone in that restaurant. She did not know how the woman had known. Later, she would decide that some people simply pay attention to the whole person standing in front of them, and that maybe that was what the day had really been about. What happened afterward moved the way these things move now, which is quickly and widely. Someone at table 6 had recorded a portion of it on their phone and shared it without identifying anyone by name. Within 48 hours, it had been seen by several 100,000 people. Journalists called Bellamy's. Richard Holt's communications team issued a statement that used the phrase, misunderstanding, in a way that clarified nothing and satisfied no one. 3 of Holt Capital's partners released a separate, more direct statement distancing the firm from the incident. Diane was offered the management position a third time. This time the hours had been restructured. She thought about it for a week. She talked to Amani about it over dinner, asking her opinion with the seriousness that Amani, at 9 years old, had always responded to and risen to meet. Amani said she thought her mom should do whatever made her feel like the version of herself she was proudest of. Diane accepted the position. Amani won the spelling bee. The word that clinched it was resilience. She spelled it without hesitating, and when the judge nodded, she turned to find her mother in the audience, and Diane was already on her feet. What Richard Holt meant as a dismissal became, in the strange and uncontrollable way of human events, a door. Not because cruelty deserves to be rewarded with opportunity, it doesn't, and the door would have come eventually regardless, because Diane Carter was the kind of person that doors eventually find. But because sometimes the moment when someone tries to make you feel small is precisely the moment the room around you decides to show you how large your life actually is. Remember that the next time someone hands you their low opinion of you, you are not required to accept it. You are not required to argue with it. You are not required to do anything except what Diane did in that moment: breathe, stand straight, and keep serving with everything you have. Because that is what quietly, irrevocably, changes a room. If this story stayed with you, leave a word in the comments, any word, that describes how it made you feel. And if you know someone who needs to hear it today, send it to them. Sometimes the right story finds the right person at exactly the right moment. Thank you for watching.